Hey everybody, hello. Watch this. I've got something. I don't know.
Why did the physics teacher break up with the biology teacher? There was no chemistry.
Right now, that was from a supporter sent me a dad joke generator. And that's the pod today. That's it. I didn't even know which joke's coming. I know one joke is coming, and that is the joke that you think you can figure out modern day politics using something like an ancient Christian template. And that's my thought today, because you can't. So don't try it. In the meantime, well, you can, and that's what we're going to do today for the next 19 minutes or so. But in the meantime, this is a packet of bourbon jerky from Conrad's Jerky Company. I'm going to reach in at some point and eat some. It's delicious. We send this with our field workers when they come through the restaurant here in Greenville, South Carolina, KB restaurant. We send this with them. It's the last thing we give them. No, not malaria pills, people. Not typhoid advice and how to avoid it. But we give them Conrad's Jerky. Real beef jerky. Yep, made by Andrew and his family in Pennsylvania. A beautiful, humble family sponsoring a stupid, idiotic podcast. But I'm so thankful for them. That's our sponsor, Conrad's Jerky Company. This is a bourbon flavor. I love it. It's delicious. I do eat it now that I'm also trying keto. Now that I've shared my personal life with you, plenty of you will make comments about how stupid that is to do keto. Why don't you just do the fast? And the answer is yeah, why don't I just do the fast? I do the fast and keto. Try that out. Right now you're thinking, gosh, I wish this was over. Today on Watar, a couple of images I want you to ponder, made from the depths of my mind in order to teach a class on, you might have guessed it, race, power, and the nature of politics. That's right. Today, on Heavy Things Lightly. So, I'm going to share a screen. For people who aren't watching, though, I'm going to use words from the English language to describe what you're looking at. But go look at this if you can, because at times, I think it offers something of use. There are other times where it was just going to confuse you. And that's part of the show. By the way, I'd like to remind everybody that I'm talking with an announcer's voice. That this is not my rant voice, because my rant voice I can't control. But if I start ranting, it's because today this pet peeve, it keeps popping up. I did a nice talk at Clemson University, to the OCF there. What a nice group of young people. Shout out to young people at OCF, including Lauren. Some of this comes from that talk, but again, I saw young men especially grappling with the idea of white nationalism. That's not really what this pod is about, but if you like that topic, you'll get plenty of it. What this pod is about is what the entire conversation in this podcast has always been about, which is, how do we reconcile that all of us are New World people dipped in a scientific method as our method for making our way through life? That's what it's become. Vis-a-vis this ancient world and the lessons it provides, especially the ancient world of the Orthodox Church, or the church, or the culture of Christ, the one offered by Christ through his apostles and the martyrs and the saints and the church. What do we do with those two worlds? One we live in and one we want to live in? Today, we look at it by taking a first look, I think an important look, at this, the notion of the ancient Byzantines, who we like to identify with. If you're out there and you're calling yourself Orthodox, well, by the way, if you're calling yourself not Orthodox, if you're Orthodox adjacent or you hate Orthodoxy, and you've tuned in, I don't know, because you hate yourself and you're just trying to hear more stuff that you hate. I don't know. If you're not Orthodox and you're out there, I want to make a toast because those are my favorite people. Because I think ideas are magnificent and marvelous, and usually people share them with, or when they share them with vulnerability, we all grow. So I'm going to try to do that right now. And if you're not Orthodox and you don't like what you're hearing, share. Let's go get a drink at the restaurant. By the way, the restaurant, KP Restaurant, is in Greenville, South Carolina, for all of you. And we do work called First Things Foundation. And if you're listening for the first time, we do like Peace Corps with a twist. I call it true missionary work, where we listen to those in the field and then, I don't know, people that actually know what they need. And then we listen in their local language and then assist them. Poverty alleviation done sort of in reverse of everything that's ever come out of the State Department and or the CIA. Thank you very much for that. Here's a toast to folks on the inside and the outside. Without one another, there would be no sides whatsoever, and we would all fall apart into diabolos. Galmardos. So, I want to start by showing you this image. I'm going to share my screen. My screen, in this case, is showing you something like an eagle. So if you could see it, what you're seeing is an eagle. You're seeing the Byzantine eagle, the symbol of the Byzantine Empire or the late Roman Empire. This is the symbol of Romans and Greeks and that part of the world circa 350 AD that said, oh, we're Romans and also Christians now. And if you can see the symbol, I'm sort of sharing it close up. If you can see it, there's a two-headed eagle, two legs, right? The leg on the left, as you look at it, is holding a sword. The leg on the right, as you look at it, is holding an orb with a cross. In the middle of the two head, the heads that are split facing left and right, and then at the top you have a crown. And the crown has at its top a cross. And so there's a reason I'm bringing this up, the Byzantine, the symbol of, shall we say, these people that I think many people, many converts are now associating themselves with. I think what you see primarily and fundamentally is a worldview. You see a way of being. And I think it's an important way of being because the eagle to the right, or the right of the eagle, or when you're looking at it, your left, is carrying a sword, which of course is a type of symbol for lines, sharp edges, which I think you can start to say is something like linear thinking, reason. This arm of the eagle, one body, two heads, this side of this being, this one half is system oriented, mechanical. It's a champion of things material, identifiable, and I think you would argue non-paradoxical. And I think this symbol is telling us something like those are good things. And yet the body is one and yet two. What's the other side? Is an orb, which of course, unlike the phallus of the sword, is, well, it's womb-like. It's not masculine like the sword, it's feminine like the mother. It intimates wholeness. There's a sense of mystery within, right? It's a symbolic mystery. It's a champion. It's a symbol of things metaphorical, subtlety, humor. If you know Spengler, he talked about the magi, the things that are hidden in the dark places, right? Under the dome. right? I think you could argue there's unspoken implications, things not quite understood. So left and right in this particular case is something like feminine and masculine, and yet it's all found in one body. And as you know, I'm sure you've heard, and if you haven't heard, it's interesting. Go consult your history. You'll see that I'm not a liar. At least I don't try to be. Is this symbol was how the state knew itself vis-a-vis the church, and the church knew itself vis-a-vis the state. United under Christ, which you can see at the top of this image is a cross, but united somehow and pulling apart and yet remaining whole. So the entirety of this image has a depth of, let's just call it mystery to it. Now, what I'd like to do is add a few thoughts that I think are very helpful. I'm now introducing above the eagle, if you can't see it, a type of political continuum, okay? So I want you to think of a continuum, something like a middle, and then a left edge and a right edge. I think the eagle that I've just described to you, the symbol of the Orthodox way of being circa 400 AD, right after the fall of Rome and the rise of Christianity in the church. The continuum I want you to think about is there's a far left and a far right. Just like there's an eagle holding a sword and there's an eagle in the other hand and the other claw holding the orb. And I want you to think as both edges of this straight line continuum, you can see in the image, both edges end on the far left and far right in diabolos. Diabolos here is, right, Latin for that which falls apart, or that's diabolo. But diabolos is to disintegrate, to fall apart, to break apart, to die. So the Greek word there, diabolos, becomes the Spanish word or Latin word diabolo, which is for things demonic or things deadly, things that disintegrate. I think on the very edges, I want you to consider politics in this way, that on the very edges, there is a sense of wildness, in a sense that things cannot hold on the edges, but you need the edges for the middle. And so I would argue that, and Ian McGilchrist, who I interviewed, go back and check it out about a month ago. McLuhan, Marshall McLuhan, who's dead, but I'm going to interview his grandson coming up. There's something about the radical, in this drawing, it's on the left, but it could be called the radical right. There's something about that part of being that emphasizes matter and clear lines. And so what I want you to think about is when you go far, far, far to the edge of this part of being, you're dealing with people who know truth and reality to be found in matter, right? Things that you can touch, smell, taste, see. What was the other one? Hear. So it goes without saying that that part of this continuum emphasizes the scientific method as a way of knowing reality. And if you look on the image that Andrew's showing, I hope, the other side, also in its radical nature, far to the edge of the continuum, is that side that emphasizes spirit or the invisible, the unseen. Both are real, pure matter, pure thought, pure spirit, right? But pure thought has a type of a wisdom element where the knowing is secret or mystical. And I'm trying to argue for you guys as we talk about politics and race. I'm trying to argue that that part, that side, that far extreme, which lives in, let's call it the funky hippie spiritual world of spirituality. You know, that's where I'm not religious, bro. I'm spiritual. If you take that thought all the way out to hippie town, you're also going to meet diabolos. You're going to meet the devil. If you take all things that are true, buddy, are found in a scientific method, that's why we have to study in order to find the reality, buddy. That's diabolos. That's death. And so if you look at, again, and think about the ego that's split down the middle, you see that it's not actually split. It's one body, two heads. But if you come directly up out of that body, right through the middle, I think what you start to see is something like symbolos, the unity of all things. And in that space, right down the middle, you find reality. And for the Orthodox East, this eagle is an image of how we know reality. And if you want to get cool about it, and you can see in the image, basically, the sun, the fleshy God that entered the world, leans toward matter as a type of knowing, a way to know, epistemology. The other side leans toward spirit, right? And so both proceed from the Father. And in some ways, they tell us about ourselves, is that there's a unity of one in three, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. But Holy Spirit tells us about a type of knowing, and so does Christ, the living God, right? The Son, the flesh. But you have to embrace all three at the same time in order to enter reality. Now, if you think about this, it gets pretty freaky, because I want you to imagine that same continuum. Where on one end is pure matter. If you go all the way to that end, let's call it the left end. If you go all the way to that end on the screen that you're looking at, all the way toward pure matter, if you go all the way over there, you're going to find people that are just utterly worshipers of matter. That's all they care about. That's all they know. That's all that's important. I think that's where we've headed for the last 300 years. The culture has emphasized again and again and again and again and again the essence and importance of matter, material reality, over and over and over again in everything that we do. And so I would argue, and if you can see again the screen, you'll see that our entire political spectrum is like a little mini spectrum. It's like a little mini continuum that I would argue is all the way over to the left. When the Republicans fight with the Democrats, they're all materialists fighting together, and they're nowhere near the center that we would call symbolos, reality, truth, the church, Christ. They argue back and forth, and every now and then you start to hear somebody who sounds like the holy middle, the royal path, but you start to realize that their entire context for the argument takes place all the way over in Mattertown. And so what's happening is people like Candace Owens, and she's out there, but there's people way further out there than her. What they're starting to do is argue into this place of gnosis. I just know it's true. I can feel it. You don't know, but you know. Why is that language catching on? It's because, like she says and so many others, the jig is up, bro. The jig is up. The people trying to control matter in order to have and control power, they've neglected the spirit for so long that now people are only going to lean into that. Does that mean we bring us back to some unified middle? Probably not. So I'm going to leave it there for a second. And I don't know if Andrew, I'm going to come back so that I'm not the small little figure on the screen anymore. But if you're entirely bored, I want to say as I end part 1, and I'll do part 2, I want to say that the next slide I'm going to use next week is a slide that places the idea of genetic reality on that slide that I just showed you. In other words, what is a human being and what are their genes to their identity? And where does it fit in the conversation about orthodoxy and the royal path? In other words, the geneticists, or a better word for them, I would say, are the race scientists, the people who created the terms we use, like black and white, who then were the forefathers of the terms we use as eugenicists, like, people who are morons and idiots and people with defective genes, that whole conversation. And then that conversation leading into something like white nationalism, and white nationalism leading into something or being a part of a conversation about, how should we say, superior races. That entire conversation can be placed in the context of this royal path, of this continuum. And you don't have to be mystified by this phrase, especially if you're a young man. This phrase, but don't you think God wants us to be together? Don't you think that he wanted the races to exist so that we might all, see clearly the borders? I don't hate anybody. I just think that like kinds should be with like kinds. It makes for a better society. It makes for happier people. Can't you see that, John? Yeah, of course I can see that. That's not really the issue. The issue is what is God calling you to do and to be? That's the great question. Because I can make sense of a lot of systems. There's a ton of systems that make sense to me. Communism makes a ton of sense. And if you really boil it down, so does capitalism. You can make sense of all that. That can feel good. The question is what you're getting called to. And next week, I want to take a look. Because I'm just going to tell you a little spoiler alert. The characters that created the categories that are so easily used today that you can't get away from. Hey, those black people commit a lot of crime. White people created a lot of inventions. These categories, black people are really good at sports. They're not wrong. The problem is the origin, the narrative origins. The problem is who is giving you this way of talking and being? Next week, we find out. Yeah. That is today's podcast. Part 1. I hope it made some sense to you. If you didn't get a chance to look at it yet, just realize the two-headed eagle has one body and a mysterious nature that enjoys the paradox and a less mysterious nature that enjoys the facts of life. And that is you, no matter how you cut it. The question is how do we get into the middle? More on that next week. I hope you guys are good. Don't forget first things. That's the reason we do all of this. And we're going to start a very cool thing where I introduce you to our field workers with each podcast. Just a little 30-second, 45-second hello. Because I'm doing interviews all over the world with these guys. I want you to adopt them and the impresarios, the local people they work with. That's what I want more than anything else. And so, this is me signing off from here, South Carolina, as I get ready to get in a car and travel to Athens to Jerusalem, the conference being put on by beloved Russian Orthodox people. Well, they're really just like, dare I say, white people. Just converts to Orthodoxy. We're putting on this cool conversation about how should we understand philosophy. Shout out to you guys. I'm heading there tomorrow. May it all be blessed, but also may you guys continue to search for something like the joy of generosity and hospitality, because that's what we're trying to do every day. Knock from these. Au revoir. Check you out later. Heavy things lightly. Peace.